I came home to a Cadillac blocking my gate, and saw my wife sitting with another man. Then two thugs stepped out. The day started like any other, quiet and uneventful. I had stepped outside for my morning routine, expecting the familiar creak of my gate and the soft warmth of the sun spilling over the driveway. But today something felt off. A Cadillac sat there, blocking the entrance completely. Not just any car, sleek, black, almost menacing in its stillness. The sun glinted off its polished surface, casting sharp, almost intrusive reflections across my gravel path. It wasn't the kind of car that belonged in our quiet neighborhood, where neighbors waved as they passed. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, hand resting on the gate. Something about the way it sat there, so deliberately, set every nerve on edge. I stepped closer, each crunch of gravel underfoot echoing louder than it should. There was a faint hum of conversation, laughter that didn't belong, casual, intimate, too easy, and distinctly not mine. The air smelled faintly of leather and cologne, an unfamiliar mix that immediately set my instincts on alert. My pulse quickened, a mixture of curiosity and unease threading through every muscle. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe a neighbor, a friend of a friend, someone borrowing the space, but deep down, I already knew that reasoning would fail. My mind raced through every possibility, each one darker than the last. Every instinct in my body screamed that this was different. I reached for the gate, my fingers brushing the cool metal. It grounded me, a small connection to reality, but even that failed to calm the rising tension. The Cadillac's windows were slightly tinted, but I could see movement inside, two figures shifting, casual, comfortable, like they owned the space. My chest tightened, a hollow ache spreading as I tried to steady my breathing. I could hear the faint click of a shoe on the gravel behind me, subtle yet deliberate. My hands tightened on the gate, knuckles whitening. My gaze flicked to the rearview mirror of the car, too shiny, too deliberate, and I felt the first real pang of fear. There was intention here, I realized, something I couldn't yet name, but could already feel pressing against me. I stepped back for a moment, gathering myself, and tried to take it all in, the sleek Cadillac, the laughter, the way the sunlight caught the edges of the car and turned it almost into a mirror, reflecting my own shocked expression back at me. Every detail etched itself into my memory, the texture of the gravel, the subtle creases in the car's leather seats, the quiet weight of my own disbelief. And then I noticed her, sitting on the porch, relaxed, familiar, yet utterly foreign in the way she smiled and leaned toward the man beside her. My stomach dropped. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out. Every step I had taken toward the gate felt heavier now, weighted with a mix of dread and disbelief. This was no ordinary morning. Something had shifted in my world, and I knew, even before I saw everything, that nothing would ever be the same. I froze in place, my hands still gripping the gate, as my eyes registered the scene in front of me. It felt like time slowed, each second stretching longer than it should. There she was, my wife, sitting close to another man, her hand brushing his in a way that made my chest tighten with a mix of disbelief and something deeper, sharper. At first, I couldn't speak. My mind refused to process what I was seeing, grasping for excuses, for illusions that could make this nightmare less real. But the way she laughed at something he said, leaning slightly toward him, the gentle tilt of her head, all the little gestures that had once been ours now belonged to someone else. A quiet ache settled in my stomach, spreading outward, making my limbs heavy, my breath shallow. The sun reflected off her hair, catching strands I knew so well. I'd always noticed them, the way they fell around her shoulders, soft and graceful. But today, that beauty felt like a dagger, slicing into my heart with every detail I took in. The smell of her perfume, faint yet unmistakable, lingered in the air, warm, comforting, familiar, and yet, in this moment, it felt like betrayal itself had a scent. I noticed the subtle movements between them, fingers brushing fingers, a hand resting for just a moment too long on a knee, shared glances that spoke of secrets I wasn't meant to see. My chest constricted with every small, intimate gesture. I wanted to turn away, to escape this vision, but I couldn't. It was like watching a slow-motion collapse of everything I had trusted, everything I had loved. A dull ringing filled my ears, the laughter around me seemed distant, distorted. My heart thudded painfully, a heavy rhythm of disbelief and grief. I wanted to shout, to demand explanations, to reclaim what felt stolen, but my voice caught somewhere in my throat. All I could do was stand there, frozen, trying to steady my breathing as a storm of emotions collided inside me. Flashbacks assaulted me, quiet mornings together, shared coffees, the way her hand fit perfectly in mine, the warmth of our laughter echoing through the house. Those memories, once comforting, now felt like cruel reminders of what I had lost, or perhaps, what I had never truly had anymore. Even her smile, the one I had loved and trusted for years, now carried a weight that wasn't meant for me. It was gentle, inviting, full of life, but directed at someone else. I felt an almost physical ache, a hollow emptiness pressing against my chest. My legs trembled slightly, but I refused to move, as if moving would make this reality vanish or, worse, confirm it. Every detail burned into my mind, the sunlight hitting her face, the casual confidence in her posture, the easy intimacy she shared with the other man. The world seemed sharper, louder, more vivid, yet all I felt was numbness, the quiet despair of betrayal that had arrived without warning. In that moment, I realized the truth, nothing would ever feel the same again. And even though I hadn't spoken a word, even though I hadn't moved an inch, everything inside me was already breaking. My body froze in the driveway, caught between instinct and disbelief. The Cadillac still blocked the gate, sleek and imposing, while the two men who had just stepped out, tall, solid, exuding a quiet menace, now lingered like shadows. Their presence wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Every instinct in me screamed that they weren't here by accident. I swallowed hard, feeling the lump in my throat. My hands, still gripping the gate, trembled slightly. The metal was cold beneath my palms, but that touch, grounding as it was, did nothing to calm the storm raging inside me. My mind raced through options: confront, retreat, call for help, but each seemed impossibly wrong, too slow, too dangerous. The taller of the two men shifted slightly, and the sound of his boots on the gravel made my chest tighten. Even the faint rustle of his leather jacket carried an intimidating rhythm, punctuating the stillness of the morning. I tried to steady my breathing, counting each inhale and exhale, but the air felt thick, almost stifling. My senses sharpened in ways I hadn't felt in years. I noticed every subtle movement, a twitch of an eyebrow, a shift in weight, the way the sunlight glinted off the thud of their polished shoes. And then there was her, my wife. She looked up at me briefly, and in that fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something I couldn't name: surprise, guilt, maybe fear. But it passed quickly, replaced by casual composure. Her fingers brushed the other man's arm again, a motion so small yet so unbearable. My stomach churned as I realized how far away she already seemed from me, even while sitting only a few feet away. I clenched my jaw, trying to force my legs to move, to speak, to act. But hesitation held me fast, a cruel vice. It wasn't cowardice, it was calculation. I needed to understand what I was facing before doing anything I might regret. The thugs didn't speak, didn't make a move, yet their silence was louder than any shout. It carried a weight of warning, an unspoken message: one false step, and consequences would follow. Every small sound was magnified: a distant car horn, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the soft brush of a leaf against the fence. Even my own heartbeat seemed deafening. My chest ached with a mixture of fear, anger, and heartbreak. I was frozen, but I was not powerless. Every instinct, every ounce of attention, was focused on reading this moment, on gauging the danger, on keeping my emotions from spilling over in a way that would make me vulnerable. I realized then how fragile the line between control and chaos could be. One wrong word, one sudden move, could escalate everything beyond repair. I wanted to yell at her, to demand answers, to reclaim even a piece of what I thought was mine. But instead, I breathed deeply, grounding myself in the cold, hard metal of the gate, trying to hold the storm inside at bay. In that suspended moment, I became painfully aware of the full weight of the situation: betrayal in plain sight, danger lurking close, and the desperate, almost unbearable tension of knowing I had to act, but not yet. The two men stood like statues in the driveway, their presence radiating a quiet, unsettling power. Neither moved aggressively, yet every instinct in me screamed that they were dangerous. It wasn't their words, they hadn't spoken a single one, it was everything else, the weight of their gaze, the subtle shift of their shoulders, the way their hands rested casually yet deliberately near their pockets. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, heavy and almost tangible. The morning sun glinted off the Cadillac again, making its sleek black surface seem sharper, more threatening. My chest tightened with each breath, and my stomach churned as the reality of the situation sank in. I was caught in a triangle of power, betrayal, and fear, unsure how to move without tipping the balance. The taller thug took a single step forward. It wasn't sudden, wasn't loud, but the sound of his boots crunching over the gravel echoed like a warning. I noticed every detail, the leather of his jacket creasing with the motion, the faint shimmer of sunlight off his belt buckle, the way the air seemed to bend around him. My heart raced, pounding so loudly it threatened to drown out everything else. And then there was her, my wife. She leaned slightly toward the man beside her, fingers brushing over his hand again. My chest tightened painfully at the sight. That intimate, easy movement, once innocent in our own private moments, now belonged to someone else. I wanted to look away, to escape this vision, but I couldn't. My feet were rooted, my gaze locked, my mind a storm of disbelief and hurt. I tried to measure the space between us, the distance I could safely maintain while still keeping control of the moment. Every micro-movement became crucial, a shift in weight, a flick of the eyes, the subtle way a finger tapped against the doorframe. The thugs communicated without speaking, a silent language of threat that I was only beginning to understand. My body tensed, ready to react, but also acutely aware that any sudden motion could spark an escalation I wasn't prepared for. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves along the fence and carrying the faint scent of leather and cologne. My senses were on high alert. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding, feel the tightness in my chest, the tremor in my hands. The gate I held on to felt both protective and confining, a fragile barrier between me and the unknown intentions of the two men before me. For a moment, the world seemed to contract around us, the bright morning became sharper, every shadow longer, every sound magnified. Even the quiet hum of the neighborhood faded, leaving only the charged silence of the driveway, the presence of the Cadillac, and the tense triangle of our three lives. I realized the situation demanded patience, observation, and clarity. Any wrong move could shatter not only my composure but the fragile control I had over this moment. I swallowed hard, grounding myself in the cold, unyielding metal of the gate, my mind racing for a way forward while my body remained perfectly still. And in that suspended, terrifying quiet, the truth settled over me like ice. I was no longer simply an observer. I was a participant in something dangerous and unpredictable, and everything I had known, every sense of safety and trust, had been quietly stripped away. The driveway seemed to close in around me. Every sound, every movement, every glint of sunlight felt sharper, more unbearable. I could no longer think in fragments, my mind was a storm, each memory and feeling crashing into the next. My chest ached with a deep, hollow pain, and I felt a tremor in my hands that no amount of willpower could still. I tried to take a step forward, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. Each movement seemed impossible, as though my body understood the enormity of the moment before my mind fully could. My wife's laughter reached me again, light, casual, intimate. The sound was unbearable, cutting through me with a precision that left me gasping for air. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make the world stop for even a second, but no sound came out. Images from the past flashed unbidden in my mind, quiet mornings with her, coffee mugs warming our hands, the gentle brushing of her hair from her face, the way her shoulder fit perfectly under my hand. Those small, tender moments, once so comforting, now felt like cruel reminders of what I had lost. Every flashback collided violently with the present, making the scene on the porch almost surreal in its betrayal. I noticed the smallest details, the tilt of her head, the relaxed way she leaned into the other man, the subtle curve of her smile directed at him, not me. The sunlight caught on strands of her hair, and I felt my chest tighten as if the very air around her was conspiring against me. The scent of her perfume, once familiar and comforting, now burned like acid in my senses. I pressed my hands against the gate, seeking something solid to hold on to, something that would remind me of reality. The metal was cold, grounding, but it could not halt the whirlwind inside me. My breathing was uneven, shallow, my heart beat loud enough that I could feel it in my temples. I realized, with a sinking awareness, that I was trembling, not from fear alone, but from the sharp, raw intensity of heartbreak and rage mixed together. Every instinct screamed at me to act, to confront, to demand, to reclaim something, anything, but rationality held me back. I knew the thugs were still there, watching, silent and patient, their presence amplifying the tension. The impossibility of acting without consequences left me suspended in agony. I was trapped between action and inaction, between confrontation and helplessness, between the past I had cherished and the present I was now forced to face. I finally sank onto the edge of the driveway, letting my weight press into the hard concrete, grounding me further. My mind reeled with grief, a tidal wave of emotions I couldn't organize or suppress. Tears threatened to spill, unbidden and unwanted, but I welcomed them. For the first time in hours, the storm inside me found a crack, a small, quiet release. And yet, even in that moment of breakdown, a strange clarity began to emerge. I saw the full scope of what had changed, what had been lost, and what might yet be salvaged. The emotional pain was undeniable, but beneath it, beneath the rage, the betrayal, the heartbreak, there was a spark of awareness. I understood, painfully and completely, that nothing would ever be the same again. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. The driveway seemed smaller, the air thicker, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I was still rooted to the spot, my hands pressed against the cold metal of the gate, every nerve on fire. The two men from the Cadillac had not moved aggressively, yet their presence alone carried a weight I could not ignore. My mind ran through every possible scenario: confrontation, escape, negotiation, each more terrifying than the last. And then it happened. The taller thug reached into his jacket and produced a small envelope, crisp and deliberate in his hand. He didn't say a word. There was no threat in his voice because there was no voice at all, yet the gesture carried an undeniable force. My heart skipped a beat. Every muscle in my body tensed. The air between us felt electrified, heavy with anticipation. I noticed her immediately, my wife. Her expression shifted ever so slightly, a flicker of fear, hesitation, and perhaps even regret passing across her face before she masked it again with composure. The casual intimacy I had seen moments ago seemed fragile now, a thin veil over uncertainty. My chest ached as I realized that this was no longer just about betrayal. There was something bigger, something I could not yet understand, lurking beneath the surface. The thug extended the envelope toward me. My eyes flitted to my wife for some explanation, some clue, but she simply sat there, her hands clasped loosely in her lap, eyes fixed somewhere distant. I could feel her subtle tension, the way her fingers twitched ever so slightly, the faint shift of her posture. She wasn't comfortable, and for the first time I wondered if the scene I had witnessed was not just about passion or infidelity, but something far more complicated. The smaller man, standing slightly behind, shifted his weight, the sound of his boots on the gravel sharp and deliberate. His eyes were locked on me, unblinking, assessing. It was as if the two of them were measuring every ounce of my reaction, testing boundaries I hadn't even realized existed. My pulse raced, and a cold bead of sweat trickled down my temple. The world seemed to narrow to the three of us and that envelope, its contents unknown, but undeniably important. I reached slowly, cautiously, toward the envelope, my mind torn between fear and curiosity. What could it contain? Was it evidence, a warning, or a plea? My hands trembled slightly as I took it, feeling the crisp edges against my fingers, and in that moment, I realized that the entire narrative I had built in my head, the anger, the heartbreak, the betrayal, might not have been the whole truth. Even as my thoughts swirled, I couldn't ignore the subtle changes in the body language of everyone present. The tension between my wife and her companion had shifted, it was no longer just intimacy, but caution, unease, even vulnerability. The thug's silence, once menacing, now hinted at something else: purpose, responsibility, perhaps even protection. For the first time in hours, I felt the smallest flicker of clarity. Something hidden beneath the surface was being revealed, and while fear still gripped me, a part of me sensed that understanding this twist could reshape everything, not just the confrontation before me, but the very nature of my relationship and the choices I would face in the coming moments. The envelope still rested in my hands, its weight surprisingly grounding. I tore it open slowly, careful not to rush, careful not to break the fragile control I had over myself. Inside were documents, photographs, something that revealed a side of the situation I hadn't anticipated: motives, misunderstandings, and truths that painted the scene I had witnessed in an entirely different light. The betrayal I had imagined so vividly was not the whole story. I exhaled, a long, shaky breath, and felt a subtle shift in my chest. The tight coil of rage and heartbreak began to loosen, replaced by a complex, tangled mixture of relief, lingering hurt, and cautious understanding. My gaze flicked to my wife. She was still seated, her posture taut but less confident, her fingers nervously intertwining in her lap. Her eyes met mine for the first time in hours, and in that gaze, I saw fear, remorse, and, perhaps, hope. The two men from the Cadillac remained quiet, their presence now less threatening, more measured. They nodded almost imperceptibly toward me, acknowledging that the situation had been clarified and that no further action was required. Their silent authority had shifted, leaving the tension in the air diffused, replaced by a cautious, deliberate calm. I stepped closer to my wife, each movement slow, deliberate, and measured. The driveway felt expansive and intimate all at once, the sunlight softened, the harshness of the morning dissipating. I reached for her hand, and for a moment, we simply let our fingers brush, tentative, hesitant, but filled with meaning. That simple contact carried more weight than words ever could. It was an acknowledgement of the pain, a silent promise that we were both still present in the same world, even if shaken. Why? My voice was barely a whisper, rough with emotion. She exhaled and met my gaze fully this time, tears brimming but unspilled. Her words were quiet, deliberate, honest, explanations, confessions, the acknowledgement of fear and poor judgment. The depth of her vulnerability struck me more profoundly than anger ever could. I realized then that what we had witnessed wasn't only about infidelity, it was about fear, pressure, and choices made under duress. We stood there for a long time, the tension ebbing and flowing like the tide. A hand brushed my shoulder, her touch gentle yet grounding, and I felt the warmth of familiarity and trust beginning to return. I responded in kind, allowing myself to let go, just slightly, of the storm that had held me captive for hours. In that moment, clarity emerged. We would need time to heal, to rebuild trust, to reconcile the layers of complexity that had brought us here. But for the first time, I knew that we could move forward together, not with naive certainty, but with deliberate choice, conscious awareness, and renewed care. The Cadillac was gone, the driveway empty but for us. The morning's chaos faded into memory, leaving only the quiet understanding that nothing could erase what had happened, but everything could be rebuilt, carefully, deliberately, and with a renewed sense of emotional intimacy. I took her hand fully this time, our fingers interlacing, our eyes locking with a mixture of gratitude, remorse, and hope. The world outside our driveway felt vast and uncertain, but in that moment, we were present, together, and that was enough. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it with honesty, awareness, and a bond tempered by fire but strengthened by resilience.